Hey everyone. Get cozy, settle into a comfy position, and let these calming tales whisk you away to a peaceful night's sleep. Drop a comment below on what time and from where you are watching this video and share your own late-night ritual that helps you drift off. In the frostbitten reaches of Skyrim, where the wind howled like a chorus of restless spirits, a lone figure trudged through the snow. Kael Frostborn, a Nord with eyes like chipped ice and a mane of auburn hair tied back with a leather cord, gripped his axe tightly. The blade, etched with runes that glowed faintly under the aurora, was his only companion in the wilderness beyond Winterhold. He was no hero, not yet, just a wanderer with a past he'd rather forget and a future he couldn't yet see. The sky above churned with clouds, their edges lit by the eerie green of the northern lights. Kael's breath steamed in the air as he crested a ridge, his boots crunching through the frozen crust. Below, the ruins of an ancient Nordic barrow loomed, half buried in snow. Its stone arches, carved with snarling dragon motifs, seemed to pulse with a life of their own. Kael's grandmother had told him tales of such places, tombs where the dead did not rest, where the dragon priests bound their souls to eternal vigilance. He dismissed them as bedtime stories. Now, standing before the barrow's maw, he wasn't so sure. He'd come here chasing a rumor, a crown older than the Empire, hidden deep within the barrow of Ingol's shade. The locals in Winterhold whispered of it in hushed tones, calling it the Shattered Crown, a relic said to grant its wearer the voice of a dragon. Kael didn't believe in myths, but he believed in gold, and the promise of a buyer in solitude was enough to drag him into this frozen hell. As he descended into the barrow, the air grew thick, heavy with the scent of damp stone and something fouler, decay perhaps, or something older. His torch cast flickering shadows on the walls, revealing carvings of warriors and serpentine beasts locked in eternal combat. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the drip of water and the faint hum of his axe's runes. Kael's heart thudded, not from fear but from the thrill of the unknown. He'd faced bandits, wolves and worse in his 27 years. Whatever waited below, he'd meet it head-on. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in darkness. At its center stood a sarcophagus, its lid cracked and askew. Kael approached, his axe raised, when a voice, low, resonant, and not entirely human, echoed through the chamber. "Who dares disturb the rest of Ingol's shade?" Kael froze. The voice wasn't coming from the sarcophagus but from the shadows beyond. A figure emerged, clad in tattered robes that shimmered with frost. Its face was hidden behind a mask of bone and iron, its eyes glowing like twin embers. A dragon priest. Kael's blood ran cold, but his grip on the axe tightened. "I'm here for the crown," he said, his voice steady despite the dread coiling in his gut. "Hand it over and I'll leave you to your nap." The priest laughed, a sound like grinding stones. "The Shattered Crown is not for mortals to claim. It is bound to the will of Alduin, the World Eater. Leave or join the dead." Kael didn't back down. He never did. "I've heard worse threats from tavern drunks," he said and charged. The priest raised a skeletal hand, and the air crackled with arcane energy. A bolt of frost shot toward Kael, who dove behind a pillar just as the ice shattered against it, spraying shards across the chamber. His axe hummed in his hands, its runes flaring brighter. The weapon was no mere heirloom. It was Frostfang, forged in the First Era and imbued with enchantments Kael barely understood. It had saved his life more times than he could count, and he trusted it now. He rolled out from cover, swinging Frostfang in a wide arc. The blade met the priest's robes, which flared with a protective ward, deflecting the blow. Kael cursed under his breath. Magic. He hated magic. "Fine," he growled, "let's do this the hard way." He ducked another frost bolt and sprinted toward the sarcophagus, using it as a shield. The priest's laughter echoed again, mocking him. "You wield a blade of the old blood," the priest said, its voice dripping with disdain. "But you are no dragonborn. The crown will burn you to ash." Kael ignored the taunt, scanning the chamber for an advantage. His eyes caught a glint of metal on a pedestal near the far wall. A crown, its surface cracked but shimmering with an unnatural light. The Shattered Crown. He just needed to reach it. But the priest was relentless, conjuring a storm of ice that tore at Kael's cloak and stung his skin. He gritted his teeth, the cold biting into his bones, and made a break for the pedestal. Halfway there, the ground trembled. The sarcophagus lid exploded outward, and a draugr clawed its way free, its eyes glowing with the same unholy light as the priest's. Then another emerged and another until the chamber was alive with the undead. Kael swore loudly. This just keeps getting better. He swung Frostfang, cleaving through the first Draugr's brittle armor. The second lunged, its rusted sword scraping against his leather cuirass. Kael parried, then drove his axe into its skull, the runes flaring as the creature crumbled to dust. But the priest was closing in, its staff glowing with a new spell. Kael didn't wait to find out what it was. He sprinted for the pedestal, dodging Draugr and frost bolts, his breath ragged. His hand closed around the crown just as the priest unleashed a wave of energy that knocked him to his knees. The metal was cold, unnaturally so, and it pulsed like a living thing. For a moment, Kael felt a surge of power, a voice in his mind that wasn't his own. He shook it off, stuffing the crown into his satchel. This wasn't the time for visions. The priest roared, its mask glowing brighter. "You will not leave this place alive," it bellowed, and the chamber shook as if the earth itself were waking. Kael grinned, though his heart was pounding. "Watch me." Kael bolted for the tunnel, the Draugr in pursuit and the priest's magic tearing at the walls behind him. The barrows seemed to come alive, stone grinding against stone as hidden mechanisms triggered. Traps. Of course there were traps. A spear shot from the wall, narrowly missing his shoulder. He didn't stop. The crown in his satchel felt heavier with every step, as if it were trying to drag him back. The tunnel twisted upward and Kael's legs burned as he climbed. Behind him, the priest's voice chanted in a tongue he didn't recognize, each syllable shaking the air. He risked a glance back and saw the priest floating, its robes billowing like a storm cloud. The Draugr were falling behind, too slow to keep up, but the priest was gaining. Kael needed a plan and he needed it now. He spotted a crumbling archway ahead, its supports weakened by time. An idea sparked. He sheathed Frostfang, grabbed a loose stone from the ground, and hurled it at the arch's keystone. The structure groaned, then collapsed in a cascade of rubble, blocking the tunnel. The priest's chant faltered, and Kael allowed himself a moment to catch his breath. "That'll hold you for a minute," he muttered. He didn't waste it. The tunnel opened into a smaller chamber, this one lined with urns and a single iron door. Kael shoved against it, but it wouldn't budge. A puzzle lock, of course. 3 rotating stone rings, each carved with animal symbols. He'd seen these before in other barrows. The locals said they were tests of wit, but Kael called them a pain in the ass. He studied the carvings, his mind racing. Eagle, snake, whale. He'd heard a bard in Winterhold sing of Ingol's barrow, something about the flight of the eagle, the strike of the snake, the song of the whale. Worth a shot. He turned the rings, aligning the symbols in that order. The door groaned, dust falling from its frame, and clicked open. Kael pushed through, emerging into the biting cold of Skyrim's surface. The aurora still danced above, but the storm clouds had thickened, and snow was falling in earnest. He didn't stop to admire the view. The priest would find another way out, and he needed distance. Kael trekked westward toward Dawnstar, the crown a cold weight against his hip. He didn't know what it was or why it felt alive, but he knew one thing. He wasn't selling it in solitude. Not yet. Something about the priest's words, about Alduin, about Dragonborn, nagged at him. He wasn't a scholar, but he'd heard the legends. The World Eater was no bedtime story. If this crown was tied to him, Kael was in deeper than he'd planned. By dawn, he reached Dawnstar's outskirts, its wooden palisades barely visible through the blizzard. The town was quiet, its people huddled against the cold. Kael slipped into the Windpeak Inn, his cloak dripping snow onto the floor. The innkeeper, a grizzled woman named Thora, eyed him warily. "You look like you've seen oblivion itself," she said, sliding a mug of mead across the counter. Kael took it, his hands still shaking from the cold, or maybe the crown. "Something like that," he replied. "Got a room?" Thora nodded, but her eyes lingered on his satchel. "Heard you were poking around Ingol's shade. Find anything worth dying for?" Kael forced a grin. "Just some old bones." He drained the mead and headed upstairs, the crown's weight a constant reminder that he'd found much more than that. Kael didn't sleep. The crown sat on the rickety table in his room, its cracked surface catching the candlelight. It was beautiful in a jagged sort of way, forged from some metal he couldn't name, its edges sharp enough to cut. The runes etched into it pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. Kael tried to ignore the whispers in his mind, fragments of words he didn't understand. Yo. Growl. He shook his head, rubbing his temples. He needed answers, not riddles. A knock at the door startled him. He grabbed Frostfang, moving silently to the wall. "Who's there?" he called, his voice low. "A friend," came the reply, smooth and measured with an accent Kael couldn't place. "Not Nord, not Imperial. Something older." Kael opened the door a crack, axe at the ready. A figure stood in the hallway, cloaked in dark furs, their face obscured by a hood. Their hands were empty, but Kael didn't trust empty hands. "Speak," he said. "And make it quick." The figure stepped into the light, revealing a woman with skin like polished ebony and eyes that glinted like a saber cat's. "My name is Sereth," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I know what you carry, Kael Frostborn. And I know the danger it brings." Kael's grip on Frostfang tightened. "You've got the wrong man. I'm just a wanderer." Sereth's lips curled into a faint smile. "A wanderer who braved Ingol's shade and lived? I think not." She gestured to the crown on the table. "That is no mere trinket. It is a fragment of Alduin's will, a key to his return. And you, Kael, are not what you seem." Kael's stomach twisted. He didn't like where this was going. "You're talking nonsense. I'm no dragonborn. I'm just here for the gold." Sereth's smile faded. "Gold will not save you when the World Eater wakes. The crown chose you whether you like it or not. Its power is tied to your blood." "My blood?" Kael laughed, though it sounded hollow. "I'm a bastard from a fishing village. My blood's about as special as ditch water." Sereth stepped closer, her eyes boring into his. "You wield Frostfang, a blade forged for Dragonborn. You survived a dragon priest. And the crown's whispers do not lie. You are of the old blood, Kael, even if you deny it." Kael wanted to argue, to tell her she was mad, but the crown's whispers grew louder, a chorus of voices now, urging him to listen. He pushed past Sereth, grabbing the crown and stuffing it back into his satchel. "I don't care about prophecies or dragons. I'm taking this to Solitude, selling it, and getting as far from Skyrim as I can." Sereth's hand shot out, grabbing his wrist. Her grip was iron. "You cannot outrun fate, Kael. The Thalmor seek the crown. The dragons stir in their graves. If you sell it, you doom us all." Kael yanked his arm free, his temper flaring. "Then find someone else to play hero. I'm done." He stormed out of the room, the inn's warmth giving way to the biting cold of Dawnstar streets. But as he stepped into the snow, a shadow moved in the alley, a figure in golden robes, watching him with eyes that gleamed with malice. The Thalmor were already here. Kael's instinct screamed at him to run, but he held his ground, Frostfang drawn and ready. The Thalmor agent stepped into the light, his golden robes stark against the snow. He was an Altmare, tall and angular, with a sneer that could curdle mead. "Kael Frostborn," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "You have something that belongs to the Dominion." Kael's eyes narrowed. "I don't know what you're talking about, elf. Move along." The Altmer's sneer widened. "Do not play the fool. The shattered crown is a relic of power, and the Dominion will not allow it to fall into lesser hands." He raised a hand, and two more Thalmor appeared from the shadows, their swords gleaming. Kael cursed under his breath. 3 against 1 in a blizzard, with a town full of people who'd rather stay warm than get involved. He liked those odds about as much as he liked the Thalmor. "Last chance," he said, his voice low. "Walk away." The Altmare laughed, and that was all Kael needed. He lunged, Frostfang singing as it met the first Thalmor's sword. Sparks flew, the runes on his axe flaring as he parried a second blow. The third Thalmor conjured a fire spell, but Kael rolled through the snow, the flames sizzling harmlessly above him. He came up swinging, catching the mage in the knee. The elf screamed, collapsing, and Kael finished him with a quick strike. The Altmare leader was faster, his blade a blur. Kael took a cut to the arm, blood soaking his sleeve, but he gritted his teeth and fought on. The second Thalmor flanked him, but a shadow moved behind her. Sereth, her dagger flashing as she slit the elf's throat. The Thalmor fell, and Kael drove Frostfang into the leader's chest, ending the fight. Panting, Kael wiped the blood from his axe. "Thought I told you to stay out of my way," he said to Sereth. She sheathed her dagger, unfazed. "You're welcome. Now, unless you want more Thalmor on your tail, we need to move." Kael glared at her, but the weight of the crown in his satchel was impossible to ignore. The whispers were louder now, insistent. So, meh, good. He didn't know what they meant, but they felt like a warning. Fine, he said at last. But I'm not your hero. I'm doing this to stay alive. Sereth nodded, her expression unreadable. For now, that's enough. They slipped out of Dawnstar, the blizzard covering their tracks. Kael didn't know where they were going, but he knew one thing. The shattered crown was no ordinary relic, and his life would never be the same. They slipped out of Dawnstar, the blizzard covering their tracks. Kael's arm throbbed where the Thalmor's blade had grazed him, but he ignored the pain, focusing on the crunch of snow beneath his boots. Sereth moved like a shadow at his side, her steps silent despite the storm. The crown in his satchel seemed to hum, its whispers a constant murmur in his mind. He clenched his jaw, willing them to stop. He wasn't some chosen one. He was just a man trying to survive. "Where are we going?" he asked, his voice sharp against the wind. Sereth didn't look at him, her eyes scanning the horizon. "Whiterun. There's a scholar there, Farengar Secret Fire. He knows the old lore, the kind tied to dragons and their relics. He can tell us what the crown truly is." Kael snorted. "A scholar? You think some bookworm's going to solve this?" "The Thalmor aren't chasing paper, they're chasing blood." Sereth's gaze flicked to him, unyielding. "The Thalmor want the crown because they believe it can control dragons. Farengar might know why. Unless you'd rather keep running blind." Kael didn't answer. He hated admitting she was right, but the Thalmor's ambush had shaken him. They'd known his name, his movements. Someone was talking and he didn't like it. The road to Whiterun was long, cutting through Skyrim's tundra, and the storm wasn't letting up. They'd need to move fast to avoid freezing, or worse, another attack. As they trekked south, the blizzard began to thin, revealing a landscape of rolling hills dusted with snow. The aurora still flickered above, its light casting eerie shadows across the plains. Kael's eyes darted to every rock and tree, expecting another Thalmor blade. Sereth, though, seemed unfazed, her focus absolute. He didn't trust her, not fully, but she'd saved his life in Dawnstar. That counted for something. By midday they reached the Pale's border, where the snow gave way to frost-covered grass. A distant roar stopped Kael in his tracks. It wasn't a wolf or a bear, it was deeper, primal, like the earth itself was tearing apart. Sereth grabbed his arm, pulling him behind a boulder. "Quiet," she hissed. Above, the sky darkened as a massive shape soared overhead, its wings casting a shadow that swallowed the tundra. A dragon. Its scales were black as obsidian, its eyes burning red. Kael's heart pounded, the crown's whispers growing frantic. The dragon circled once, then veered east toward the mountains. Kael let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "First time seeing one?" Sereth asked, her voice low. Kael nodded, his throat dry. "Heard the stories. Didn't think they were real." "They're real," Sereth said, standing. "And they're waking. The crown is part of it. We need to keep moving." Kael didn't argue. The dragon's roar lingered in his mind, as did the crown's whispers. For the first time he wondered if he'd bitten off more than he could chew. The road to Whiterun was treacherous, not just for its weather but for its predators. As Kael and Sereth descended into the tundra, the air grew warmer, but the dangers multiplied. Saber cats prowled the hills, their eyes glinting in the dusk, and bandits roamed the trade routes, eager for easy prey. Kael kept Frostfang close, its runes a faint glow in the fading light. They made camp that night in a shallow cave, its entrance hidden by a copse of pines. Sereth built a small fire, her movements precise, while Kael tended to his wound. The cut wasn't deep, but it burned, and he didn't trust it to stay clean. "You're good with that dagger," he said, breaking the silence. "Where'd you learn to move like that?" Sereth didn't look up from the fire. "Hammer fell. My father was a Redguard blade dancer. He taught me to fight before I could read." Kael raised an eyebrow. "And now you're chasing crowns in Skyrim? That's a long way from home." Her eyes met his, sharp and guarded. "Home doesn't exist anymore. The Thalmor saw to that." Kael didn't press. He knew loss well enough to recognize it in her voice. Instead, he pulled the crown from his satchel, turning it over in his hands. Its surface was cold, its runes pulsing faintly. "You said this thing's tied to my blood. Care to explain?" Sereth hesitated, then spoke. "The shattered crown was forged in the Dragon War, when mortals first rose against their dragon overlords. It was meant for a dragonborn, someone with the soul of a dragon. The legends say it amplifies their voice, letting them wield the Thursday like the dragons do. Kael frowned. And you think I'm one of them? I've never shouted a mountain down. Not yet, Sareth said. But the crown's awake in your hands. That's no coincidence. Kael wanted to laugh it off, but the memory of the dragon's roar stopped him. He set the crown down, its weight heavier than ever. If you're right, what's to stop the Thalmor from taking it? Or the dragons? Sareth's expression darkened. The Thalmor want to control the dragons to use them as weapons against the Empire. As for the dragons, they serve Alduin. If he returns, the crown could be his key to dominion. Kael's blood ran cold. Alduin, the World Eater. That's just a myth. Is it? Sareth asked, her voice barely above a whisper. You saw the dragon. You heard the crown. Myths are waking Kael. Before he could respond, a twig snapped outside the cave. Kael was on his feet in an instant, frostfang drawn. Sareth doused the fire, plunging them into darkness. Footsteps crunched closer, too many for a lone wanderer. Kael's heart raced. Bandits, Thalmor, or something worse? He didn't wait to find out. He burst from the cave, axe swinging. The first figure, a hulking Nord in furs, caught the blade in the shoulder and went down screaming. Two more lunged, their swords glinting. Sareth was a blur beside him, her dagger finding throats and gaps in armor. But there were too many, 6, maybe 7, and they weren't bandits. Their cloaks bore the Thalmor's golden sun. Run! Sareth shouted, parrying a blow. Kael didn't argue. He grabbed the crown and sprinted into the tundra, the Thalmor's shouts echoing behind him. The chase was on. The tundra stretched endlessly before Kael, its hills a maze of shadows under the moonlight. His lungs burned as he ran, the crown's weight dragging at his side. Sareth was close behind, her breath steady despite the pace. The Thalmor were relentless, their spells lighting up the night, fireballs and lightning bolts that scorched the grass and cracked the earth. Kael dodged one, feeling the heat singe his cloak. We can't outrun them, he shouted, risking a glance back. The Thalmor were gaining, their leader, a different Altmare, this one with a staff crackling with energy, chanting in a tongue that made Kael's skin crawl. Sareth grabbed his arm, pulling him toward a riverbank. The white river roared below, its waters swollen from the spring melt. Jump, she yelled. Kael didn't hesitate. He leapt, the cold air rushing past as he plunged into the icy current. The water hit like a hammer, stealing his breath. He surfaced, gasping, and saw Sareth break the surface nearby. The Thalmor hesitated at the bank, their spells fizzling in the spray. Kael didn't wait to see if they'd follow. He swam downstream, the current pulling him toward Wyvern's plains. They washed ashore an hour later, shivering and battered. Kael's arm ached, the wound reopened by the river's chill. Sareth's face was pale, but her eyes burned with determination. We're not safe yet, she said, wringing out her cloak. They'll track us. Kael nodded, too cold to argue. The crown was still in his satchel, its whispers muffled but persistent. Cree? U.S. He ignored them, focusing on the horizon. Wyvern's watchtowers were visible in the distance, their torches a faint promise of safety. But safety was an illusion now. The Thalmor knew he had the crown, and the dragon's shadow loomed larger in his mind. As they trudged toward the city, Sareth spoke, her voice low. There's something I didn't tell you. The crown doesn't just amplify the voice. It binds the wearer to Alduin's will. If you're not strong enough, it could consume you. Kael stopped, his blood running colder than the river. You're saying this thing could control me? Sareth met his gaze. I'm saying it's a weapon, and weapons cut both ways. Farengar will know how to shield you from its power. But you have to trust me. Kael laughed bitterly. Trust? I don't even know you. Then know this, Sareth said, her voice steel. I've lost everything to the Thalmor. My family, my home. I won't let them take Skyrim too. Help me, Kael, or we're all doomed. Kael didn't answer. The crown's whispers filled the silence, and for the first time he felt their pull, not just in his mind but in his soul. Wyvern's walls loomed as the sun rose, casting golden light across the plains. The city was a fortress of stone and timber, its keep perched on a hill like a watchful giant. Kael's legs ached, his wound a constant burn, but the sight of the gates gave him a flicker of hope. If Sareth was right, Farengar could make sense of the crown. She was wrong. Kael was walking into another trap. The guards at the gate eyed them warily, their hands resting on sword hilts. "State your business," one demanded, his helm gleaming in the dawn. "Travelers seeking rest," Sareth said smoothly. "We've come from Dawnstar looking for trade." The guard's eyes lingered on Kael's bloodied sleeve and Frostfang's glowing runes. "You look more like trouble than traders. No funny business in Whiterun, or you'll answer to the Jarl." Kael forced a nod, keeping his mouth shut. The guards waved them through, and the city opened before them, a bustling maze of market stalls, smithies, and taverns. The air smelled of fresh bread and forge smoke, a stark contrast to the tundra's chill. Kael's stomach growled, but he ignored it. Food could wait. Answers couldn't. They made their way to Dragon's Reach, Whiterun's great hall, its wooden beams carved with tales of ancient heroes. Farengar's secret fire was easy to find. His study was a clutter of books, scrolls, and strange artifacts, tucked away in a corner of the keep. The mage himself was a wiry Nord with a sharp beard and sharper eyes, his robes stained with ink and ash. "You're the ones asking about dragon lore," Farengar said, not looking up from a tome. "I don't get many visitors these days. Most folk think dragons are fairy tales." Kael set the crown on Farengar's desk, its runes casting an eerie glow. "This fairy tale nearly got me killed." Farengar's eyes widened, and he leaned forward, his fingers hovering over the crown but not touching it. "By the divines, the shattered crown. I thought it was lost." He looked at Kael, his gaze piercing. "Where did you find this?" "Ingol's Shade," Kael said. "And it came with a dragon priest and a pack of Thalmor." "Care to explain why?" Farengar's expression darkened. "This is no mere relic. It's a conduit, forged to channel the Thursdam. Only a dragonborn can wield it safely, or so the legends say." He glanced at Kael. "You've heard its whispers, haven't you?" Kael's jaw tightened. "Maybe. Doesn't mean I'm dragonborn." Farengar chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "The crown doesn't whisper to just anyone, but there's a way to know for sure." He pulled a dusty scroll from a shelf, unrolling it to reveal a map of Skyrim, marked with ancient sites. "The Wall of Words at Bleak Falls Barrow. If you're dragonborn, the wall will awaken your voice." Kael crossed his arms. "And if I'm not?" "Then the crown will destroy you," Farengar said bluntly. "Or Alduin will." Sareth stepped forward. "We don't have time for tests. The Thalmor are hunting us. We need to know how to protect the crown, or destroy it." Farengar shook his head. "Destroying it would be unwise. Its power could turn the tide against the dragons, or the Thalmor. But it must be wielded by the right hands." He looked at Kael again, his eyes narrowing. "Are you ready to find out if those hands are yours?" Kael didn't answer. The crown's whispers were louder now, and the weight of his choices heavier than ever.